Well, hey, welcome to the latest edition of the Gray Area. This one coming off a rough game against the Minnesota Vikings. That was awful. Not great from your Detroit Lions, and we've got a lot to get into. We'll start with what we learned. We've got to talk numbers over narratives. The numbers tell a kind of gross story this week. Johnny Nomo or Momo? We got to talk about the offense. Let's get into that as well. A potential silver lining in all of this, and our second straight look at the enemies list with some people that held over from last week, and some brand new entrants, including some calls that are coming from inside the house. First, do all of the clicky things. Yep, everybody on YouTube says it, including us, because that's how we make the things go. Please subscribe to the channel, like this, throw in some comments. Feel free to share it on the social medias if you are so inclined. All of that helps us do what we do around here, and especially after a week like this, let's be honest, we can use all the good vibes we can get. So please be a part of that. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's start with what we learned coming out of the game against Minnesota. And these lessons are always so much easier when you're coming off a win. Not so much when you're coming off a division loss at home. That's no good. Lesson number one for me was whatever they did during the bye, that was trash. Throw that plan away. It was bad because this team was unprepared in all three phases. Yep, the offense was terrible, and I'll get into that here in just a minute. But the defense gave up 5 first downs by penalty. The team as a whole committed a season-high 10 penalties, and the special teams was atrocious with the field goal block and the kick return yardage. This coaching staff didn't have this team ready to go. They were confused. They couldn't execute. Nothing seemed to work in any of the three phases, and obviously something that goes on with the week of rest needs to be examined, because these Dan Campbell teams are 2-1 coming out of bye weeks, and that was an especially stinky performance. Leading me to lesson number 2, which is now the rest of the division games are vital. The Lions are 1-2 in the division. They were 6-0 a year ago. That is a huge precursor to your playoff seeding, and every one of the remaining games now becomes incredibly important. And you've got to go into Minneapolis. And you've got to go into Chicago. So none of those things get any easier. You've got to win your division games. Lesson number 3, the elephant in the room. The elephants in the room. The offensive line and the offensive line health is officially an issue. You already know that Mahogany is gone at guard as I record this. There's no official word as to whether or not his season is over, but certainly he's going to be out for an extended period of time. Taylor Decker was so banged up and said that he couldn't tell anyone about his knee because the meds he was on for his shoulder made that impossible. Penei Sewell couldn't move his arm in the post-game locker room, and you lost Ratledge for some periods of time during that game. The offensive line was already in trouble, and Brian Flores dialed up blitz after blitz after blitz to go after those A-gaps in and around the centers and the guards and getting after it through the middle of the pocket. That is going to be the blueprint for every opponent that the Lions see. Dan Quinn's a pretty good defensive coach there in Washington, and even though he's the head man, I guarantee he noticed, and he's going to be sending blitzers through their A-gaps regardless of who's playing guard or who's in there. The offensive line for the Lions makes everything go, and right now it's going nowhere. In fact, they're going backwards, which is a problem because Jared Goff is going to need some time if the pass game is going to work, and by the way, if they get the run game going. Lesson number 4 for me. When the run game doesn't work for the Lions, it poisons everything. Everything else falls apart when you cannot run the football. And right now, the Lions cannot run the football. They had one promising run from David Montgomery, turned into a fumble. Ja Gibbs really struggled to get anything going. They're getting hit behind the line of scrimmage. Again, going back to that offensive line performance, nothing was working offensively. But you can't run the play action game. You can't clear the space for the wide receivers. You can't get the defense to honor what you're doing when you can't run the football. And that starts with plowing the road up front. The Lions have got a big task ahead of them for the rest of the year because everybody's going to see what Brian Flores just did to them. And if they can't get their run game on track, it's going to make life really, really difficult for the rest of the offense. And finally, they didn't let this one get away. The final lesson, one of maybe hope. And we'll talk silver linings here in just a little bit. They didn't absolutely get run off the field. They were in this till the very end. They make a play on that third down in the fourth quarter. They get the ball back. you have a shot. In fact, we've seen that exact same game happen between the Lions and the Vikings not that long ago under this Dan Campbell-led administration. They were in it till the end. It was the mistakes that doomed this team. It was the lack of execution that doomed this team. It is a Minnesota win, but Minnesota had help. They had a lot of help from a lot of mistakes that the Lions made. And that, if anything, is a source of hope because they got things right enough to be in it, despite all of those mistakes. And they made enough that any one of them individually could have been the game winner. 5 sacks given up, leading the season total in penalties, the blocked field goal, the fumbles, on and on and on and on and on. But they were in it till the end because they kept fighting. And as the game wore on, if the Lions could have executed here or there, it's a very, very different game. So figure that part out, get that part of the plan put in, and whatever it was they installed over the bye week eliminated, and you've got something to work with moving forward. All right, let's get into some numbers over narratives. And not all of them are terrible, believe it or not. Start with the good ones. 305. That's total yards. Lions actually led in total yards in this game. 62. It's total plays. Lions also led in total plays. 240. That was pass yards. Lions led in that category. 3108. Time of possession. Again, the Lions had the edge in time of possession in this game. Didn't feel like it. And 4.9. Not a great number, but also led the game in yards per play. All of those edges show you that the Lions created an opportunity to win the game, but that the mistakes they made came at crucial junctures at far too common a pace, and that's what did them in. Another number, speaking of mistakes, 10 penalties. 10 penalties. Split 50-50 between the offense and the defense. You can't have it. I mean, you cannot win games when you set your season high for penalties. And Dan Campbell has been up front saying, we got to eliminate the penalties. We got to eliminate the penalties. We got to eliminate the penalties. And I agree with him. I think you should do that. I don't think you should set a season high coming out of the bye week when you knew that third down execution and your penalty situation were both problems. Another number that's coming up a couple of times here already, 5. Number of sacks given up by this offensive line. The pocket was collapsing directly into Jared Goff's lap, and that screws up everything. It screws up the run game. You couldn't get running backs free. It also screws up the pass game. Nothing can develop. I know Jameson Williams was a hot topic for a long time. Why wasn't he getting more targets and some of his longer developing, deeper routes, and the fact that Jared Goff just hasn't had time? Well, this game, Jared didn't have time to get it to anybody. And yes, we'll get to the screen thing. I've been harping on that for a couple of weeks. And finally, 65. 65 rush yards. It's not going to do it. When the run game doesn't go, it poisons the entire offense. Said it before, I'll say it again. A sublet off of that number, 2.8. That was yards per carry for Jah Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is capable of great things, but he couldn't get going, owing itself all to that offensive line performance. And yet, all of those other numbers still apply. The Lions still were offensively in a place where they could have won this game had it not been for the consistent, repeated, mind-numbing mistakes. Numbers tell the story on this one, and the offense isn't going to like any of the meetings they're going to be in before they head to Washington. And that brings me to the question that, at least according to my internet feed, Reddit, and the open sewers that are Blue Sky and Twitter, is the burning question on the minds of all Lions fans, and that is, when are we going to fire John Morton as the offensive coordinator? When is he going to be stripped of his play calling duties? And it's an interesting question. I have bigger ones. I want to say for the record that right now, as we stand in going into the 8th, 9th game of the season, I don't think that John Morton necessarily needs to be fired, because I'm not convinced that John Morton is necessarily in and of himself the issue. There are some bigger problems with the play calling right now, and I think it involves at least some of the procedures and the process that go into this thing. Again, I'll point to lesson number 1 that I learned coming out of this, and that is that the bye week plan was garbage. They were not ready to go, and they weren't ready to go anywhere. None of the team was ready. The defense was bad. The special teams was bad. The offense was especially bad, and the offensive play calling is getting a lot of attention. I don't think that's wrong. The offensive play calling is a problem. Yeah, we're going to talk about screens. I've been on the screens for a couple of weeks for the record. I just don't know that it's all on John Morton. What is the structure that's built into the offense right now? You watch Dan Campbell on the sideline, and he's a hell of a lot more involved with that play card than he was a year ago when Ben was at the helm. You know that Hank Fraley is involved. You know that David Shaw is involved. You know that Jared Goff is involved in the offensive play design. All of those guys are in the room. So I have a hard time boiling it down to one guy in the booth on game day and thinking that he's just out there running rogue and doing his own thing that nobody's ever talked about or agreed upon. That everybody else is just standing by with their hands in their pockets and letting John Morton call plays that nobody else thinks will work. Let's also keep in mind that Jared Goff has a heavy hand in the offensive play design and the game plan week to week. He said as much in the post-game press conference. You say, kill, 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 kill every single week. That's Jared Goff checking into a play that Jared Goff believes in. So when that blows up, is that also on John Morton? Is it in the playbook? I've said for a long time that Ben Johnson got too much love for his offensive genius running what was Dan Campbell's offense. Dan Campbell doesn't get enough attention for his knowledge of football, and especially his knowledge of offensive football. Well, now we flipped it. Ben Johnson got too much credit. I think John Morton may be getting too much blame because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and nobody seems to want to ask Dan Campbell just exactly what's going in to his offensive process. What is creating these game plans? It's a cohesive process. We know that the buzzword around Allen Park is collaboration. There's a lot of really smart offensive minds in the room making up the game plan week to week. So why is it looking the way that it's looking on Sundays? I don't think that's just John Morton. Let's also remember that there's a history with this. Anthony Lynn came in when Dan Campbell first started with Detroit and could not get on the same page as the head man. It was week 8 when Anthony Lynn was relieved of play calling duties. Then Dan kind of did it for a while. Then he sort of put training wheels on Ben. Then Ben sort of took off. But the offensive cohesion from the head coach to the offensive coordinator has been an issue before. It looks like it's an issue again. And I haven't heard anybody ask Dan Campbell to explain what the process is in building out these game plans. How much of it is John Morton? How much say does John Morton get? Who's in Jared Goff's ear? What's going into those play calls? Because collectively, they've been really, really bad. And everybody's got a role in it. Again, David Shaw, Hank Fraley, Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, John Morton, all of them are involved in this thing. And if any one of them is going into Sunday thinking that the game plan doesn't work or that it won't perform, then they need to step up and say so. Until then, I'm a little bit hesitant to just fire an arrow into the tent of John Morton and assume that he is entirely to blame for this thing. It's still Dan Campbell's offense. I believed that when Ben Johnson was rolling up number 1 ranks throughout the league with it, and I believe that now. So they've got to look hard at what they're doing procedurally and figure out what's going into building out these game plans day to day and week to week and fix that part of the process, or this thing gets ugly quick. I don't want it all to be doom and gloom. There is a silver lining. There are 2 silver linings, actually. One of them specific to me and a handful of other people that are far too invested in certain things. But the number one thing is that they were in this till the end. The Lions made mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, and yet they were still in it at the end. They had a chance, if they can make 1 third down stop, to get back in this game and get a game-winning or a game-tying score out of their offense. Now, no guarantees, shouldn't have come to that. I understand all of that, but the fact of the matter is this team still kept playing, and they kept scrapping right along. So they still had an opportunity in a game that they made enough mistakes to lose themselves 3. If they play like this anymore this season, they're not going to win those games. They're not going to have too many opportunities when you make that many mistakes, but they had one in this game, and there is something positive to be had in that. The other silver lining that is quite literally a silver lining is that maybe, just maybe, once again, like the Bernie Sanders meme, I'm once again asking for the silver pants. Can we be done with the blueberries now? Can we be done with the monochromatic? All right. You want to go marshmallows, the Lions have lost in those. The blueberries, now the Lions have lost in those. The All Blacks, we've seen the Lions lose in the All Blacks. I want my iconic Honolulu blue and silver uniforms, for the love of God. I'm an old man. I don't require fancy things. I don't have complex needs. Just want some silver pants on Sunday. Can we get some silver pants now? Can we do the kit that looks as good as any in football and put this team back on the field wearing the actual Detroit Lions uniforms? It's the first week of November, and we've yet to see them. And we know now that the blueberries are not some magical elixir. I don't believe in superstitions, and I don't do lucky hats, and I don't believe in any of that stuff anyway, full disclosure. But even if you do, now you've seen them lose at home with blue pants on. That's not the uniform. Silver lining is the Lions played hard till the end, and maybe now we can get silver pants. A literal silver lining. And yes, I am digging for something positive to come out of this ugly game with Minnesota, and that might be the best we get. Next home game, silver pants. Let's go. All right, let's wrap things up with the enemies list. We will start with screens. All kinds of screens. Window screens, computer screens, screen time, screen passes, bubble screens, tunnel screens, all the screens. I've been harping on this for a couple of weeks. The Lions were number 1 in screen plays last year. They were 27 headed into this game. I don't know where they are right now. I don't want to look at it. It's not good. Screen passes are terrible. It looks like the white flag of surrender. If you're a certain age, you remember when 3rd and long meant draw play to Sanders. Well, the new 3rd and long prayer ball is the screen pass, and it's not working. The middle of the offensive line is a problem with the guards in the center play, and that was a problem all game long against Minnesota. But there's also problems on the wings. They can't get things blocked up. There is a tell in the screen game, and everybody's in on it. So got to fix that. Get the screens fixed. Also making the enemies list, the number 5. It is not only the number of sacks given up, as we went over earlier, but the number of wins held by the Green Bay Packers, Chicago Bears, and Detroit Lions in a logjam in the NFC North. It adds all the spice necessary to those division games and the end of the season, and oh boy, is that Thanksgiving tilt against the Packers going to be something. All because everybody's bunched up there with 5 wins and desperate to get things right, especially after the Packers went out, stunk up the joint in Lambeau against the Panthers, while the Lions were stinking the joint up at Ford Field against the Vikings. Around the NFC, making the enemies list for a second straight week, the Eagles. They somehow won on their bye week. I'm still not quite sure how this worked. They make a trade deal for Jalen Phillips because Howie's not playing by the same rules that everybody else is. They also watch a lot of other important losses stack up in the NFC. They had themselves a time. The NFC East continues to stumble along. The Giants are now probably good and dead and buried with all of the injuries. And the Eagles just managed to roll right along, despite the fact that they didn't even play. Teams from last week that are also on the enemies list again. I told you about these boys last week. Watch out for them dudes from Seattle. Seahawks are pretty good. Sam Darnold was playing on the inside of the Matrix Sunday night, and he looked outstanding. That defense is very stout. I know, before I get too far into this, somebody's going to say, wait till December on Sam Darnold. And you're right. He may turn back into a pumpkin. But right now, he's playing really, really good ball. They're getting huge chunk plays in the offense. Defense is balling out. Seahawks are a problem. And in their yard, the Rams also made the enemies list last week, making the enemies list this week. They're very good at football right now. Matt Stafford's playing really, really good. They went out and did what the Lions should have done, which was to make a lesser opponent look like a lesser opponent and win a game that was never really in doubt. They're playing very well. The nice thing, if you're looking at it from a Lions fan point of view, is that the Seahawks and the Rams have played each other a couple of times, so they're going to beat each other up. And finally, a debut on the enemies list, Chris. Yeah, Chris. The guy I should have been doing the postgame show with, but I didn't. I didn't do the postgame show. You know why? Because Chris was at the game. Chris was at the game in Ford Field. He went and saw Minnesota score 27 points and get that win. You know when Chris was last at a Lions game? When Minnesota was there and they scored 27. Now in that one, in the gray pajamas, the Lions managed to squeak out a last-second win. It was the very first one of Dan Campbell's administration. Yay. That one went well. This one didn't. And Minnesota played to the exact same level 27 points. The Lions needed a prayer in the fourth. They got it the first time Chris went. They didn't get it the second time Chris went. And you didn't get a post-game show. And it's all his fault. I kid, sort of. I'm not superstitious. I don't think Chris did anything to cause the loss. I just hope he watches this and feels some sort of shame. That's going to do it for me, man. I got to get out of here. Obviously, the loss got me a little silly. They looked terrible. This team looked unprepared. They made a bunch of mind-numbing mistakes. They've got so much to clean up, and it's going to take more than some rah-rah to get that done. I trust Dan Campbell and company are on the case as they head into Washington, a place they have not won a great many games. They've got to get right in a big, big way. They got a lot to fix. So they'll be working hard at it, and we'll see. I guess, fingers crossed. They haven't lost back-to-back games in a long time, and hopefully that continues. Please like and subscribe to the channel. That's how we get to do what we do. And until next time, see ya.